reading through the Bible in a year in the 1 Year Bible, and our daily devotion for today, August 6th, looks at the Old Testament section from Ezra chapter 3 verse 1 through chapter 4 verse 23, and we're looking in particular at chapter 3 verses 1 through 7, although it applies to the whole chapter and beyond. This particular account takes place in the Hebrew month of Tishri during the year of the return from Babylon, which was 533 BC, and this month lasted from September 20th through the 19th. And so the altar was built and the first sacrifices were offered on the 1st of Tishri. Later that month, from the 15th to the 20th, that is October 4th through the 10th, the Feast of Booths was celebrated. Now, the 7th month was an important month in the Hebrew yearly religious cycle. The first day of the month was ushered in with the sounding of a trumpet and celebrated with a holy convocation. This day is still celebrated in Jewish calendars as the beginning of the civil year and is called Rosh Hashanah. On the 10th day of the month is the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. Then from the 15th to the 21st day is the Feast of Booths, or Sukkot, when it is celebrated. So, as chapter 3 starts, the Israelites have settled in cities, and the author of Ezra emphasizes how there was continuity with the past worship in the first temple, in Solomon's temple. The temple is where God was worshipped according to the commands given through Moses. And in Ezra, the first 6 chapters of Ezra in particular, the temple is the overriding concern. Cyrus's decree, if you'll remember, concerned the temple. Those who returned did so to build a house of Yahweh, the Lord, which is in Jerusalem. And when they got there, some of the family heads gave voluntary contributions to finance the rebuilding of the temple. The temple is clearly intended to be a rebuilding of the house of worship that God had authorized Solomon to build according to his promise to David. Although that temple had been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, Jerusalem could still be called the site of the house of Yahweh, or the house of God, because God had chosen Zion as his holy mountain and the place of his dwelling. And he promised to choose it again. This choosing was fulfilled initially in the rebuilt temple, but ultimately it was fulfilled in Jesus Christ, for the temple foreshadowed Jesus and his ministry. Zerubbabel, who led the construction, was a direct descendant of David, and he began rebuilding the temple in the 2nd month, just as Solomon had done. And the song they sang was the same, for he, God, is good, and his steadfast love endures forever. We also see a mixing of rejoicing and weeping at the building of the foundation of the temple in Ezra. They rejoiced for the new temple, but they wept for the old temple. And even though there was sorrow, they could still rejoice in the continuity of worship of Yahweh that was now established at the place he had chosen. This continuity is important because of the promises of God. God had promised forgiveness through the sacrifices. However, Moses had instructed Israel to offer these sacrifices only at the place that Yahweh, the Lord, would choose. Now, at the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, the place God had chosen so long ago, Israel could once again be certain that God would grant forgiveness through the sacrifices offered by his faithful people, just as he promised Solomon. In Chronicles we read, "Then the Lord appeared to Solomon in the night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. when I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command the locust to devour the land, or send pestilence among my people, if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. Finally, as we look at the message of Ezra, we can apply it to worship today. Whenever God is worshipped and wherever God is worshipped. For we see that worship begins with God's actions and promise, not with human choices. Notice that the returnees are no longer called exiles, they are Israelites. The altar was built on the spot where the altar of the first temple stood on the threshing floor of Araunah. And indeed the altar, like Solomon's altar, was built before the temple's foundation was laid. And it was built for the purpose of reinstating the historic sacrifices that God had commanded through Moses. We now see that the promised Messiah, Jesus, would sacrifice himself, would suffer and die once for the forgiveness of sins of all people. His atoning work will always and forever give forgiveness and everlasting life to repentant sinners. So that gives us the backstory, the background, the meaning of our Old Testament reading and this whole section in the book of Ezra. May God be with you and bless you, and I'll look forward to talking with you